Hi, so will the Battle for Azeroth Alpha invites being sent out this last week and maybe another lot in another week or two's time? Hype very much for the Battle for Azeroth, and of course, what everyone's going to be doing is wanting to find out everything they can from data mined information as well as watching people stream what they can. But at the moment, by far the majority of the information that's coming our way is from data mining, from the likes of Wowhead, of course, and Perculia, Data Hunter Perculia, who is the person who is in overall charge of coordinating all those efforts, was very kind and offered me an interview today. I have to say she was actually really awesome because it actually took two interviews. The first interview, don't even ask me how, wasn't recorded, so she gamely stepped up, had some breakfast quickly, and then agreed to do a second interview. So that was absolutely fantastic. Thanks very much, Peculiar. And here's the interview. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for coming on. Peculiar, so data hunter in charge of all the data that comes through from Wowhead, where everyone looks up the things on races and items and things like that. And the questions I'm wanting to mostly ask about is in terms of processes, what we can determine about Blizzard's process and how your things work. So the first one was about things that are data mined that maybe Blizzard didn't intend, or whether it's accidentally on purpose. And the big one more recently was, I mean, we got the allied races just before BlizzCon, but what we also got just before BlizzCon was Kultiras armor at a time when officially we didn't know anything about the new expansion. And it's a case of, was it accidental on purpose just to generate hype, or was it a genuine mistake caused by maybe rushing to meet deadlines or something like that?
So historically, there's always one slip up on Blizzard's end where something related to the upcoming expansion is found. I think that these are accidents because there's so many little things to keep track of. But I also think that as time goes on, Blizzard doesn't mind it as much because it generates a lot of hype. Like YouTube videos, Twitch, Reddit threads. In the case of the Kulturas armor, for people listening that aren't aware, there were a bunch of icons called like Kulturas Quest 8.0, like something that used the naming scheme that Quest armor gets in previous expansions. So the speculation was, oh, well, there's something called Kulturas, and it sounds like a quest thing, so we're going there in 8.0. We're going to be leveling here. And then we got some of the armor files, and we could tell, if you lift up the guy's arm, that there is a map on the side with tentacles. So, we had a lot of fun with that. But past examples were like a little iron node called like Iron Horde, or in Cataclysm, there were masks of the Worgen and Goblin before they were races in the game. So the speculation was, oh, they'll be added, and surprised they were. So Blizzard tends to do stuff like that. And I think that because data mining's gotten more sophisticated, they kind of trust people to handle it well. And it just, it's like free hype for them.
Yeah, so, but potentially there was that feeling of double-edged sword from their point of view, like there are in a lot of things. Like I say, developers often talk about the fact that they're very pro-community, Blizzard traditionally always have been, and developers will say things like, but we wish you didn't do all this theory crafting and things like that to learn playing the game. And maybe with the data miner, they sometimes think this is really good for marketing, but occasionally, oh, you're finding things that we weren't ready to announce yet. But you think they're getting much better at sort of seeing the benefits in it from their point of view, do they?
So it's still kind of walking a tightrope, and about a week ago, Blizzard made a post trying to explain what was okay and not okay to data mine, but it was worded in a way that kind of created, I think, more confusion. But I personally try to reach out if there's something that I think they might be confused by. And some of it's related to data mining, but some of it is just like presenting things at the right time or in an accurate way. So, for example, Blizzard's gotten pretty interested in spell diffs because they haven't done a great job maintaining their own PTR posts or even development notes. So it's kind of like, oh, just go to the sites and like see all the class changes. Like, we're not maintaining that. So I think they're happy with that. And you can see things like new items or, mounts or quests. I think Blizzard appreciates that as well. I think where things get kind of weird is if sometimes they get touchy about cinematics. For example, we data mined a Gul'dan cinematic from the live server when 7.15 started, and they asked us to take it down because they're like, well, you found it normally, you didn't do anything crazy, but this is too early. We don't. It's our IP. We don't want people focusing on Gul'dan. We want them to be focusing on Insurrection. So we took that down. And then I noticed with the Battle for Azeroth Alpha, there were some things with like the Lordaeron cinematics or videos that made it seem that people were playing the alpha when they weren't, that were taken down. So I think that that's kind of the line of showing cinematics before it's too early in the hype cycle, as well as making it seem like you're playing the game when you're showing a zone before it's finished. And actually, at one point in Warlords, Blizzard actually asked Wowhead how we used Farsight to go to spires, and they thought we were doing like something hacky. And so it's like, well, like that was sort of very low tech, but they still didn't really want us, showing the zone before it's ready, because I think that can even confuse the most casual people that think that like, oh, we're actually playing this new content.
Yeah.
But yeah, I pretty much email Blizzard like every week being like, hey, like, we changed the background on the model viewer. Like, does this look okay? Or hey, like we found this cinematic of the allied races. Like, is this okay? I just, better be safe than sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, good to have a good working relationship on both parts, I would guess, really, in this case.
Yeah.
So with BFA, so the alpha the alpha was sort of put up a couple of weeks ago, but invites have gone out in the last few days. But there's going to be, you would think, about 7 months before release. We can't be absolutely certain, but round about that. Whereas for Legion, we had a good 9 months. Is that because Battle for Azeroth is much more ready than Legion was at the same time? Or was it more to do with all the work they were doing on classes and things like that during Legion that's maybe not so much for Battle for Azeroth, do you think?
So I think there's a few factors. One is that I think that the huge class changes and the artifact weapon, I think that took a ton of development time, especially the artifacts, because you have like these two different teams and the artifacts affect what the class people are doing. And then the artifacts need like content for every single spec, and they all have to be different, and they all need special animations, and they all need a ton of artwork. So I think that was a huge resource drain. I do feel that the pacing is interesting. Blizzard has really tried to revamp how they pace things. And I remember when the gap between BlizzCon and playable Legion was very small. BlizzCon and data mineable Legion was small. But, and people were like, oh, like a lot of this looks really unfinished. Like I remember when artifacts came out, people had no idea what they were because you could data mine it before you could actually see them in game. So people had the totally wrong impression of them. But instead now we've had BlizzCon in November, and we can always start data mining end of January. And so to me, Blizzard is like trying to get maybe they were, they're working on it for a few months behind the scenes, but they didn't actually want us playing it. And they're trying to present a slightly more polished product, now in the early alpha. Also with pacing, I do think that with Blizzard trying to have a steady drip of content every month, and how when there's a new patch, it's less, here are 20 things to do all at once, and how they spread it out more. I do think that we're going to see a similar thing in Battle for Azeroth. So it's not going to be do islands day one. It's not going to be, do the Uldir raid 2 weeks after it launches. I think they're going to stagger it more, and then that gives them more freedom to develop some of the more max level endgame stuff.
Yeah, because they've moved that way with Legion very much, haven't they? Because they completely dissociated, say, some parts of content with the major content patches coming. Raids in particular were coming out with the 0.5s rather than the main thing. And they tried it as well with the Broken Shore, didn't they? But they didn't quite get it right. So they intended for a new thing each week, didn't they? But then they front-loaded all the best stuff because they changed. Yeah,
they had a new quest each week, but like some of the quests were like, kill 5 elites. But it was a little similar because 12 weeks into it, you could get your class mount, and that was, that was a pretty big milestone. And we're even seeing that with 735 because, we know that there's something coming with the artifact weapons in the cinematic. We know that the Seething Shore is going to be a thing, and none of that has happened yet, and the patch has been out for a few weeks. Yeah,
absolutely. So in terms of 7.3.5, before that hit, there was some interesting things data mined which suggested... See, I still didn't believe that there was not going to be another raid coming. Because the Fat Boss brothers had asked in Hazakostas, I can't remember, was it PAX or something, but it's
I think Gamescom, because they're,
it might have been Gamescom,
Gamescom.
So they'd basically asked, is there going to be another raid after Antorus? And he said, well, there's not going to be another raid tier, and there's not going to be like a Ruby Sanctum thing, which left the door open for small Trial of Valor type raid. And I was utterly convinced there's going to be one.
I mean, there still could be. Like, there still could be, like, something horrible happened in Silithus, and now we're fighting the Azerite boss. Like, that could just pop up.
It could, yeah. But what was Datamined, of course, was Concordance, which is currently capped at 50, and it's an impossible limit to achieve, certainly during the life cycle of Legion. But then it was Datamined that the cap was going up to 100, so people were thinking, oh, are they going to increase artifact knowledge? It's going to be another piece of content that needs more powerful artifacts. Is that something that they've put in? Maybe they were thinking about it and it's not coming in, or is there some other reason for that, do you think?
So I have a few ideas on that. I think that one reason could be there's artifact instability coming at some point, which they added like a UI string, and when you can trigger it on the PTR, the UI, like the numbers rapidly go up and down, and your artifact flashes, like making it seem like you're gaining and losing traits every few seconds. So maybe this could be something that allows them to make it seem like your artifact got really powerful, or maybe they were, I don't know, refactoring their database, and maybe stuff goes up to 100 now, and they just set, concordance equals max numbers, so it scaled up to 100, not 50. But yeah, they never actually. Usually, if someone data mines a spell and it's wrong, they'll be quick to be like, hey, don't trust data mining with everything. But they never said that about concordance. They just sort of, I don't know, I kind of think it was a data error, or it's tied to this instability thing that's going to happen at some point.
Right. I mean, that is quite interesting. Is there, I mean, particularly spell data as well, are there a lot of spells that get thrown in that never end up getting used, and items and things like that? Traditionally, did you see a lot of that?
Yeah, so I mean, for one example, is there was this guy Incognito toy, and it was data mined in the Legion beta, and it got changed in 7.3.5 to be called the Doomsayer's Robes. So I think they like, oh, we never got the model awesome on Guy Incognito, so we reused it. But yeah, there's a lot of cool toys like that haven't been used. There are, of course, mounts and pets. Every alpha build, they get rid of some sort of talent. I sometimes think they put in stuff just to confuse us. Like there was a bunch of old god spells added in the beta this past week. There's definitely even models, for example, like there is a whole different model for the fishing artifact weapon that I don't believe has been used. So there's a lot of interesting stuff like that. Also, a good example was Warlords of Draenor, because there was a lot of unused things or stuff that got changed in advance. For example, the data mine quest that was seen in the PAX East Alpha build had a totally different storyline than what we actually got. Like a lot of Gorgrond was cut, and Shadow Moon had a different storyline. There was like an updated Gorehowl weapon model that didn't get used. Like the end boss of the expansion got changed. Shatrith was going to be a raid, and now it's not. They just sort of seem to cut out the middle of that expansion. So yeah, there's been a lot of they just always kind of change things every single build, and it's interesting keeping track of that stuff on the site, because you can see like what would have been, or will this toy actually ever appear in an upcoming build, or is it gone for good?
Yeah, or I mean, you're saying if something's put into the game and it's intended to come out sometime in the future, but let's say they're running out a bit of time to do a deadline, they could put one bit of content back and maybe bring another forward that's actually complete, so they don't have to be absolutely focused on, okay, for the next patch we're definitely going to have this out, because there's a bit of flexibility, do you think?
Yeah, so a good example of this is the secret finding Discord stuff. The Sun Darter egg and the Lucid Nightmare. I think some of that stuff was added in an earlier build, and then Blizzard ended up changing the items like a few months later, so no one would know that the name had changed. And then they're like, oh, look at all this content we added related to it. Also, the Doomsayer's Robe, that's just like a nice little perk that was added in later. Or, things even like, I think like the Tameable Hunter Pet Lolathin, like that was data mined a while back, but you couldn't actually tame it until a certain world quest was up with the Nighthold. So I think that all ties into Blizzard's idea of staggering things, as well as just making deadlines. Like we usually data mine all the holiday items for the next 6 months at the same time. So to me, that's like, someone's being told, hey, like, this week we're going to do holiday stuff up until, June. Like, get that all done. Okay, great. We're just going to put that in now.
Yeah. So in terms of stuff over the years that eventually hasn't made it, which would you say is the one that you personally are most disappointed with? The sort of thing that you thought, oh, this is coming, this is going to be great, and it never did.
Let's see. I mean, I think I would just say the Warlord stuff because I did a lot of promotional things with the movie. I had a red carpet interview with the premiere, actually, and it was very clear that they wanted the movie to tie in with the launch of Warlords of Draenor, and then the movie just got way delayed. And, being an Alliance player is really cool to see the Draenei have a bigger, presence and have Shadowmoon Valley be, alive and well. So it was disappointing that the whole Talador, raid arc and seeing how Rill, became more powerful. It was disappointing to see how that was all cut. And that's why I'm kind of excited about the potential Draenor orcs in the Skorgrond map that was just data mined, because I know a lot of other storyline was cut from Warlords about the orcs. So I think it would be interesting if, I don't know, maybe in their story experience they'll just like put some of those quests back in there.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shame about that. It almost seemed like it was cursed. So Warlords of Draenor unfortunately has gone down as the expansion that people would like to forget. And as you say, it was supposed to be tied in with the film because Blizzard said they were developing Legion with Warlords at the same time, so they could, bring out whichever one first would allow Warlords to tie in with the film. Where I actually really liked the film, but unfortunately didn't do well enough to guarantee a sequel. So it's a bit of a shame that sort of both those things didn't quite work out as people would hoped, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think they even said the director had a director's cut that just he wanted it to be like 50 minutes longer than it actually was, and that cut's not going to see the light of day. And I think that would explain a lot of pacing issues. Like, I think all the scenes were really good, but the pacing seemed a little off in points, or the order was more like cliched Hollywood, and you didn't really understand all the characters, like, who's Lothar, or like who's Medivh, or like why is this castle important? We see for 2 seconds.
Yeah, so, exactly. And you could sort of tell it was definitely linked to the film because apart from anything else, Dalaran was flying, where of course we'd know at the time it was stuck in the ground, where there's a whacking great crater now. But so in terms of Battle for Azeroth, coming back to that with the innovations, there's always an innovation every expansion, and the big one seems to be the island, or at the very least the smart NPCs that we're going to be doing battle with. So what are you able to infer in terms of how they're going to work realistically? Are they actually going to react to us, or is it just going to be a Dungeons and Dragons style, roll a d12, they do this thing to make it not necessarily smart in the real sense, but they will do surprising things that make it more challenging for us?
So there hasn't been too much data mined or demoed about islands so far. We do know that the NPCs will have smart AI that kind of builds upon the follower AI. Like the follower AI in Warlords was kind of a test, like a very test basic sandbox of that, where, it's like, oh, you walk and the NPC moves out of the way and then like salutes you or says a certain thing if you're a certain class. Like we saw that a lot in Legion, certain specs would have interactions with NPCs in certain places that not everyone got. We know there's going to be different difficulties, and the NPCs will react differently in them because it would be kind of annoying if it's like, oh, this is normal and the NPCs keep beating me up. We know there'll even be like a PvP mode, which means they have to be pretty smart and reactive to those sorts of things. But yeah, so far all we have is a few island consumables and a few data mine broadcast lines of Sneaky Pete, who's they joked he's sort of like the annoying PvP rogue. So I'm not really sure how it's all going to work yet, but I assume, there'll be new data files that are like, smart NPC abilities here, and we'll be able to maybe be like, okay, like this NPC can potentially use these 10 abilities, and we can see that, this ability's on like a 1 minute cooldown, or, maybe there's like a proc chance for him to use this 25% of the time, etc. Stuff like that.
Yeah, just have to hope there's nothing bizarre comes out. Although I suppose with testing there always will. I've now my mind's just gone back to in early Legion Alpha with the Paladin ability, which is eye for an eye, where two rep paladins going at each other, where it's supposed to do the auto attacks, and anyone attacks you, they get a bunch back, and two just went at each other, and there were some mad things happening there. It'd be interesting to see what happens when it does come in for testing. So, in terms of races, obviously everyone's very excited about the Zandalari trolls at the moment and Dark Iron Dwarves because some stuff has been data mined on that. But what I know some people have been asking me about is why is it, for example, with the Zandalari trolls, there's a lot of stuff data mined. We can data mine like what their racials are called, but not necessarily what they do. And we know what classes they can play. But then with the Dark Iron Dwarves, again, a load of stuff data mined, we can see what their racials do, but we can't see what classes they are and things like that. So can you explain a little bit about the way Blizzard implement races into the game?
Sure. So, in kind of non-technical terms, there are a bunch of these database files related to every facet of the game. So, like, there's one for achievements, there's one for spell descriptions, there's one for spell effects, you have a place where there's NPCs, there's a place for quests. There's so, like, all these different files. So, there's no one, Dark Iron Dwarf folder that's like, okay, well, like, here's your icons and, like, here's your models. Like, you have to go to, like, 20 different places to find each facet. And sometimes they get updated at different speeds. So with the whole racial situation, even with the race icons, it wasn't apparent at first. Back in 7.3.5, there's a bunch of icons. And we found a bunch of icons that shared the naming convention of, like, ability, Dark Iron racial. So we're like, okay, let's find all these. Oh, look, there are 5. Okay, it's ability Dark Iron Mole Machine, ability Dark Iron, Dungeon Delver. So we inferred the names based on the image names. And, so that was added back in, like, December. And then we so then when we data mined the spells recently, we just, for fun, look through the uncategorized spells for those names. And we're like, oh, look, there's new spells. There's the Dark Iron ones. So Zandalari is sort of earlier in that process where Blizzard's populated the item file, but they haven't populated the spell description file yet. So we aren't sure what they are. I was checking yesterday for them. I didn't see them yet. So, yeah, I mean, as for other things, Blizzard has added in the Zandalari mount, but not the Dark Iron one. So there, but then Dark Iron have the audio voice over lines, but then they don't have the Zandalari just have the written names. They don't have the audio yet.
Yeah.
I think people are most excited though about the models of them. I think the Zandalari were added slightly earlier than the Dark Iron, and Blizzard can keep updating these. For example, when we data mined the Nightborn, they didn't have 3 hairstyles at first, 3 hair colors, and the High Mountain Tauren males didn't have tattoos, and then Blizzard added the green and blue tattoos like a month after the initial data mining. So it's sort of like a very ongoing process where there's like 20 places that race-related info can be, and they sort of update them piecemeal.
Yeah. So that was quite interesting. So in terms of just coming to talking about Wowhead specifically, so there's, again, usually with each expansion, there's usually a few new features, again, usually to help people out with the new features coming in the expansion. Are there any things that are going to be coming to Wowhead or have just recently come onto Wowhead to help people navigate their way through the BFA testing?
Sure. So we've just been updating the dressing room actually with the Zandalari and Dark Iron, as well as because people are really hype about races in general, we've enabled all of the NPC races that are also flagged as playable races, so you can dress up and speculate. So like there's Thin Humans, Kultiras humans, and the Vulpera female. We've also enabled skin tone for all the races that are things like orcs, so like you can dress up, Garrosh's skin, or, an Eridar Draenei, or, Frost Dwarf in Storm Peaks and see what it looks like. Or there's some really cool Wildhammer tattoos that you can try out even though they're not an allied race. So we think people are having fun with that. As usual, we're continuing with the news, multiple posts a day, greatly expanding the team to have more regular writers as well as guest posters on, what they specialize in, like, classes or raids. We have a Discord webhook, so you can get alerts for the data mining and other stuff right when that happens. We've been on Twitch trying to explain any data mining discoveries as well as running through the new content. And as for what's in the future, it's pretty much whatever Blizzard throws at us. In Legion, we really tried to do a really solid guide program and supplement the guides and tools with interesting data other sites were putting together. For example, the Mythic Plus guides on Wowhead show the top teams for each dungeon, and that's automatically updated by Raider.io. And the talent calculator now shows you the top chosen talents among the top 100 Mythic players, and that's powered by Warcraft logs. And we're working on something with dynamic and personalized recommendations from raid bots on the gear pages. So we want to keep doing more of that in Legion, not Legion, Battle for Azeroth. So we want like a Heart of Azeroth calculator, obviously, and maybe we can work with sites to, show based on their sims or just aggregated data what's the most popular. The dressing room we'll keep getting updated as more races are flagged by Blizzard. I know people really want to see the Sethrak race, the little snake people there. Continuing with the guides and trying to make them more personalized when possible on the class and rating front. We actually just added a search highlights feature. So I know sometimes on Wowhead, if you search for something and it's not a database term, you get a weird message that nothing was found, or you get taken to a weird page. If you type in something like Taurus boss, it's like, I don't know what that means. So we set up a thing where for popular terms that weren't returning results, we now have a very pretty page that is suggested guides, here's a Garathi World Breaker instead. So, if you type in Battle for Azeroth now on Wowhead, you'll have a list to a lot of our popular articles. You'll have a link to all of our data mining. You'll have a link to the profession overview, the class overview, Zandalari, and Dark Iron. So, if you're lost about the expansion and you're worried that Wowhead doesn't have a data mined page for an item, so you can't then learn about the expansion, you can just type in popular phrases into the search bar now, and you will get taken to a cool guide or news post.
Yeah, I suppose when you're going back to with the guys, if people can have suggested items, that would be quite useful for people.
Yeah.
Particularly with the Azerite armor, because we don't know a lot of details, but if someone can go, oh, that's supposed to be pretty good for me, and it sort of tells them which dungeon or wherever they need to go to farm it as well, that could be quite useful for people.
Yeah. So or if it's on this, for this boss, 90% of people use this, setup. It's okay, yeah. Well, even if it's just 90% of people use this helm on on this boss because it has a certain Azerite talent matrix. That's still useful.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So thanks very much for answering our questions. Just again, passing on thanks. I know many of my followers obviously find Wowhead absolutely invaluable for looking up stuff like that. I personally couldn't have possibly done without it in terms of looking up codes for Simcraft. Raid bots has come and made it a little bit easier for me, at least to advise other people, but I absolutely still look at that. So thank you very much.
You like raid bots.
Wowhead, it is absolutely the number one resource out there outside of Blizzard. So thanks to you and your team for that, and thanks for coming on and talking to me today.
No problem. If you guys want to find Wowhead elsewhere, you can find us on Discord, discord.gg/Wowhead, and Wowhead on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, all those other places, or me at Perculia. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot. So there we go. That was my very first interview. Something had to go wrong, of course. Yes. Not recording the first interview. I actually created a list, a big long list of things you're bound to cock up, and I ticked them off, and I didn't do that wrong, and I didn't do that wrong, and I didn't do that wrong, all the way down. Didn't actually add on to the list. Are you actually recording it, you imbecile? Apparently I wasn't. There we go. I'm not going to explain what happened exactly, because actually anything you can imagine is probably less embarrassing, so I'm not going to do that. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're interested in finding out more about Wowhead, I've linked in the description below not only links to the site itself, obviously, but also their Discord if you want to join on that, provide any feedback, as well as Perculia's Twitter handle herself. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.